time to wrap this up. Guys, Nonfiction November has been so much fun. I feel like I've learned so many things. I've read so many books that have been wonderful. I've also read a few books that have not been so wonderful. We're going to talk about all of those together. We're also going to talk about the bingo and how I did. And I can't wait to get into it. So why don't we just jump in? Let's review the bingo first. Why don't we? So I have a couple that I haven't marked off yet, so I will do that with you right now. Since I have talked to you last, I have checked off read a book with an average star rating of 4 stars or more. Read a book about, well, I didn't read a book about politics because I DNF'd it, and we'll talk about that too. I read a memoir, and it wasn't Marcia. It was different. I read a book with a person on the cover. I found a new 5-star nonfiction. Can't wait to talk about that. And I read a book about feminism. Did I read anything else? Oh, read a book with an average star rating of 4 stars or less. So I almost got like a blackout bingo board. Here's what it's looking like in the bullet journal version. We did a good job this month. So if we're looking at this, I got 1, 2, 3 bingos. 3 bingos, that's pretty good. I'm not mad about 3 bingos. It would have been cool to check off all of the squares on the board, but that was a little ambitious, so I don't feel too bad about it. Let's get into the stats, the reading stats, and then we'll get into the actual books. So this month I read 13 books, which came out to 3,955 pages. Pretty good. They were 100% nonfiction. Shocker. I never got around to reading that classic book. Also a shocker. 85% of those books were print, 15% were audio. My top 5 moods were reflective, informative, emotional, inspiring, and challenging. My top 5 genres were politics, memoir, history, feminism, and race. My average rating for the month was 4.06, which was pretty good considering I did have a few duds this month. So I'm happy with that. 15% of my books were from the library, 8% were books that I purchased this year, and 77% were already on my physical TBR. 77% of my books were written by she, her authors, and 23% were written by he, him authors. 46% of my books are written by white authors, 38% by black authors, 8% by Indian authors, and 8% by AAPI authors. So let's talk about the DNF first. Let's get this out of the way. The negative. So for starters, I tried to read this book physically with my eyeballs. And I had an immediate problem when I realized that there were no quotation marks. And that is not normally something that bothers me a lot, but something about the way that this is laid out, there are like almost no line breaks ever, and it made it really, really difficult to keep myself on track. So I switched to the audiobook like almost right off the bat. Didn't even finish the prologue before I was like, okay, this is not going to work for me. So I switched to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author, and I was able to get to 50% before I decided to call it a loss. And I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly why I didn't like this, but I will try. I'll do my best for you. First issue I had, this is not really broken up into chapters. This is like a part 1, part 2, part 3 type of thing. And it's very much like he's telling stories and like vignettes of his life and his experience as a part of the border control. And it feels pretty disjointed. And I don't know if that was just me and the way that I was reading it, or if it actually was written in a very like disjointed way, but it felt very stream of consciousness, which sometimes is hard for me to stay engaged with and stay invested in. Not to mention the contents of this book are very brutal at times. We talk about some really graphic things and some really dehumanizing things as well. And because I didn't get all the way through the book, I don't want to make like really strong judgments and assumptions about this author as a person and their personal growth. But it just made me uncomfortable to read about in a way that I was like, I don't know if I want to learn what is going on here. It just made me like deeply, deeply uncomfortable. And there were parts that were even a little bit triggering for me. And I'm not usually the type of person that gets triggered while reading. But there were some very graphic depictions of self-harm, and just really, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about. So I couldn't bring myself to continue listening, especially because I really didn't feel like I was learning anything substantial, because he's just telling stories. He gave like a little bit of history about the border of Mexico and like how that border was decided. And so that was kind of interesting, and I did feel like I learned a little bit there. But because it is so stream of consciousness and story focused, I just felt like I wasn't learning anything that I could really take away from this, other than this is just his personal experience. And while that is valuable, it wasn't valuable enough for me to keep listening and putting myself at risk of being even more triggered. Like, I didn't know what was coming next. And so it just wasn't for me. I would love to read a book on immigration and border patrol in the future, because I want to learn about the topic, but this just was not for me. It was not cutting it. And it's a shame that I purchased this book. It was a library sale purchase, so I didn't like drop a bunch of money on it, but it's definitely going to be one that I unhaul, unfortunately. Next up, we've got Breaking the Social Media Prism, which I did do a reading vlog for. So if you want even more in-depth thoughts on this one, then you can go watch that. But this one, my biggest issue with it was that it was more about political division, political tribalism, than it was about social media. And I really wanted to read a book about social media. And maybe that's my fault for misinterpreting the title and the blurb of the book, because it does mention political tribalism on the back, but the title has social media in the title. So I just thought it was going to be more about how to heal our relationship with social media, which is kind of the route that I was wanting to go. There still were some interesting studies in here, some interesting research that was done. So I didn't feel like, I didn't hate the book, but I certainly did not love it. I rated this 2.75. I really just felt like the stuff that I was learning, I kind of already knew. And so it was just like, it was deepening my knowledge, but it didn't really add a lot of value to me. And it was written in such a way that it was like almost clinical. Like, it was very, very textbooky, which made this very dry. And for a book as short as this, I wouldn't expect to have such a hard time getting through it, but it took me a while. Like, it took me way more hours to get through this book than I would have expected. So, just wasn't for me. Then we've got the Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative? By Mark Fisher, which I rated 3 stars. 3 stars. And this is another one that was written in a very, very academic, like textbooky way. But with this one, I did feel like I learned a lot. Like, there were things in here that I didn't already know prior that I felt like I really could take away. I don't think that this is a good book if you are a beginner when it comes to learning about capitalism and alternatives to it, because of the way it's written. It's just very, very wordy, very, like I said, very textbooky. And so it's not one that you can really connect to on an emotional level, really, unless you already have some idea of how you feel about the capitalist system and the pros and cons of it. But I do think that this is a book that I will return to in the future. I took many, many notes in the margins. I underlined a lot, highlighted a lot. This is actually the second time that I have worked my way through this book, although the first time I read it, I didn't even mark it on my reading tracker because I felt like I did not absorb anything. This time around, I felt like I really retained information. So it's just one of those that feels more like study material than casual reading material, which is okay. It's just not something that's going to be for everyone. So for that reason, among others, I decided to rate this as averagely as possible because I do see the value in it. However, I didn't necessarily enjoy reading it. However, again, I could see myself returning to it in the future. So, 3 stars. Then we have Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich. I still don't know if I'm saying that last name right. This is actually the second book that I have read by Miss Barbara. And funny enough, I ended up rating this the same that I rated her other one that I read, 3.75. And I think that the reason I rated it kind of low, not very low, but like lower than I would have expected, is I just felt like it was honestly too long for what it was. So basically this book, Barbara is doing an experiment where she wants to see how the lower working class lives and survives in America. And she did this study in 1998. Okay, so it's a little bit outdated. The book was published originally in 2001, but she does this experiment where she goes to different cities and tries to survive on a lower working class salary. Not salary, but like wages. She starts in Florida as a waitress and learns about like tips and how the tip economy works and how that affects like what you can actually afford as far as rent and groceries and transportation go. And then she is working with a maid service in Maine. And then the last part is retail in Minnesota. So she's working at Walmart. But in each of these experiments, she is only allowing herself to live off of the wages that she earns at these jobs, even though she is already an established like writer, freelance writer at this point. So she has enough money to get by, but she's trying to see how hard it really is to be a working class citizen in America. And it is very, very interesting. I found it fascinating, truly, but I think the stories went on too long. I wanted to be more in the research and less in the stories. And she shared a lot more like story material than I would have liked. And I think that's what made this so much longer than I would have preferred. But there was a lot of, there were a lot of good takeaways from this. And I think that this is a really good book for someone who is curious about economics in America and the way that our economy works and the pitfalls of capitalism. This is a better intro to capitalism than capitalist realism. I would most definitely start here before you go into a more academic, textbooky type of read. But I did start to get a little bit disinterested around halfway through because I felt like she was telling kind of the same experiences from job to job, even though she was working in different professions. She was kind of learning the same thing over and over, just in different areas, different professions. It was an interesting read for the most part. Just wasn't my favorite of the month. But I would recommend it. I think that it's a book that everyone should read at least once, or at least attempt to read. Next up is Gloria Steinem's The Truth Will Set You Free, but First It Will Piss You Off, Thoughts on Life, Love, and Rebellion. And this is a book that I enjoyed. I rated it 4 stars. I would have rated it more, but this was mostly quote material. And what I mean by that is we're seeing a lot of pages like this. So you're losing out on a lot of narrative because you are filling up the book with short little blurbs like this, which is really good for some people, especially if you are new to reading about politics and feminism and new to understanding how all of that affects you personally, this is a really great book to start with that. I just have already reached that point and surpassed it in a way. I feel like if I had read this in 2020 when I first got into politics, it would have completely rocked my world. I would have rated it 5 stars. But what I wanted from this book was more of this type of writing. I wanted more fullness and more narrative than the blurbs. Now, I did take a lot of notes. I have several little sections where I have sticky notes of things that really spoke to me, but I just would have liked to have more, not really more substance, because this really covers a lot of material in a very short book, but I think I would have liked to dive deeper. So this covers a lot of surface area when it comes to different sections of politics, different sections of feminism, and how that affects people. I just wanted to dig under the surface a little bit, so that's why I rated it lower than 5 stars. But I do think that anyone who is new to nonfiction or new to reading about politics would really, really enjoy this, and it would really, really, really speak to you. So I do recommend it, despite not rating it 5 stars. The lighting is changing. We have to go faster. Microactivism. This is in another one of the reading vlogs. I ended up rating this 4 stars for kind of a similar reason as The Truth Will Set You Free, because a lot of it felt very, very blurby. I think that this would be a great book to read with like a discussion group or a book club, but as a one person like solo experience, it wasn't quite as valuable. I think that if I had a group of people that I was like studying this with, discussing it with, it would be much more enlightening and interesting. But I did really enjoy the quiz in there that tells you about your activist archetype. I thought it was a really good entrance into activism, because a lot of people are intimidated by activism and they think it means it has to like completely change your whole life, and that's not necessarily the truth. You can work activism into your daily life as it is right now, and this book tells you how to do that, and I think that's really important and really valuable. So this is a good one, just not my favorite of the month. I might have to move. I might have to move myself. Maybe if I just scoot over. Please hold. This is not as symmetrical, but it's gonna have to do. So next up, we've got There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension, which is a book that I've had on my TBR for a bit. I bought this, I think, last year, maybe even for my birthday. I think I've had it for a while. And I didn't really know what to expect from it, but I did hear a lot of people talking positively about it, so I expected to enjoy it, and I did. I do think that my reading experience would have been enhanced if I had listened to the audiobook, because this is very much poetry. This is a poetic, prose-heavy book, which I don't mind at all. I actually really enjoy it, but sometimes when I'm reading it with my eyes, I get to the point where I start to skim and I start to kind of lose my engagement with it, because I'm not able to fully pick up on the rhythm of the poetry all the time. So that wasn't my very favorite. I think I would have absolutely adored it if I had listened to the audiobook, but I didn't, so my rating has to reflect that. But I really enjoyed it otherwise. I did a whole bunch of talking about this in a reading vlog as well. So if you want more in-depth thoughts about what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy, you can go watch that. In the same reading vlog, I read Year of the Tiger, which I also rated 4 stars. I couldn't remember. This one, the reason that I didn't rate it 5 stars was I wasn't totally on board with like the attitude of the writing. It felt like it was powered more by anger in some parts than I normally can jive with, but I totally understand where the anger comes from. Alice Wong is a woman who has been living with disability all her life. She is also in the activism space, and so she is well acquainted with inequality and discrimination and prejudice. And so I understand where the anger comes from, and I do not fault her for it. She is totally free to feel however she wants, but it is harder for me to connect with angry writing and negativity than it is for me to connect with a more like hopeful and inspiring tone. And while this is still inspiring, it just took a little bit longer for me to get there and feel really connected with her as an author. But there were parts that I really enjoyed. Some of the interviews were really good. I loved that she included so much transparency when it came to like the money side of disability and how much it really costs people to be disabled, which is something that they can't control. And I also liked that there were like photo inserts in the middle. I talked about this a lot in the reading vlog because it lightened the mood so much to have so many colors and doodles and just like kind of silly goofy things to break up the really heavy chapters and the really heavy topics. So I appreciated that, and it's one of the reasons why it ended up bumping up to a 4-star rating, because my level of enjoyment reading this was kind of like mid. Like it was giving like around 3-star, 3.5-star enjoyment, but whenever it was breaking up the heaviness with like funnier chapters or with like silly goofy snack manifestos and things like that, it really helped me to feel just like better overall about reading it. So I think that there is a lot of good to find in this book. And even though the tone of the writing wasn't always for me, I did find a lot of value in it. I learned a lot from Alice, and she's an author that I do want to continue returning to, because this is the second book of hers that I have read. I think that she is an author that I will continue to read from. Next up, we've got Blues, Legacies, and Black Feminism by Angela Y. Davis, who is one of my favorite nonfiction authors, like officially, because every book that I've read from her, this is I think the third that I've read from her at this point, she always makes me care about a topic no matter what it is. And I'm not someone who knows a lot about the music scene. I don't know about music history, especially when it comes to Black culture, especially when it comes to blues culture. So to enter into a book that I really have no foundation in at all and learn a lot from it, that is quite an accomplishment. And Angela just writes in such a way, she just makes me care. I don't know how to explain it any further than that, but she just makes me care about things that I didn't think that I would. So I ended up rating this 4 stars because there were times that I wasn't quite as invested. There were times that I wanted to dig in deeper to some things that she didn't dig into. And also I have mixed feelings about the amount of lyrics that are included in the back, because let me just give you an idea. So this much of the book is just lyrics of songs written by the women that she is talking about in this book, which is cool, but it takes up so much of the book. And I almost would have liked to have the book even maybe be longer and dig more into the lyrics of the book instead of just putting all the lyrics in there and then not talking about them, which granted, some of the songs that are included back here were talked about in the first half of the book. But with that being said, I did learn a lot. I learned a lot. I took notes in the back with some things that I learned about. I learned about sexuality and travel as symbols of freedom in life and in lyrics, with Black women specifically. Women's blues were often used as almost like advice columns for younger working class women, especially during like the 1920s, 1930s era. Older Black women would write these songs about the trials and tribulations that they had faced in a way that was like advice giving to the generations that came after them, and I thought that was really interesting. This book talks a lot about art and music as forms of protest, which I thought was really cool. I love to read about how creativity is used as political activism or political resistance, and this book detailed a lot about that, and that was probably my favorite part of the book. I loved reading about that, and if we could have like stretched that part out more, I think I would have enjoyed it even better. But anyway, this is very insightful and very interesting. So if you are someone who already cares about jazz and the blues genre of music, or if you care about feminism, or if you care about Black culture, if you care about any of those things at all, then you're gonna like this book. And I'm pretty confident when I say that. Next up, we've got Better Living by Their Own Bootstraps, Black Women's Activism in Rural Arkansas from 1914 to 1965. This one I really didn't have high expectations for, because I kind of had the impression that this was going to be more textbooky, more history book style. And it was that to a certain extent, but I was really engaged with it the whole time. Like, I was very invested in most of these chapters and learned quite a lot. I ended up writing out the takeaways from every chapter at the end, and I think that helped me stay invested a lot. One of my favorite things that I learned about was agrarianism, I hope I'm saying that right, which is a social and political philosophy that advocates for rural development, a rural agricultural lifestyle, family farming, widespread property ownership, and political decentralization. And as a person that lives in a rural area, reading about the way that people sought to connect to each other and avoid social isolation, the ways that people were trying to uplift each other and educate each other and feed each other. It was just all very inspiring and very close to home for me, especially because this is all about Arkansas. I'm Arkansas born and raised, baby. Like, this is my state's history, and I loved learning about it. There were so many historical events in here that I was like, dang, I should have learned about that in school. Where was that in my history book? Like, for example, this may out me a little bit, but for example, the Mississippi River flood of 1927, which was also known as the Great Flood, didn't know that happened. Didn't know about that. Should have. And also the 1919 Elaine Massacre. I knew about that like a little bit. Like, I had heard of it, but I had never been like taught anything about it. So I really appreciate a history lesson about things that I should know. And the way that this was written in a way that I was able to connect with. I was able to retain information. Something that this book talked about over and over and like really hammered home for me was the importance of knowledge and information, as well as food security. So the main things that all of these organizations, all of these women were trying to achieve for Black rural families especially, but just all families in Arkansas, was the access to good education and food security. And those two things were very interesting to read about, and I'm someone who cares a lot about literacy. Obviously, I mean, I run a booktube channel. I read so much, and so I understand the value of reading, and I think everyone should have access to books. I think everyone should have access to proper education, and so to read about that over and over was very validating for me, because it's something that I value so much, and to see it valued so much in a book, it's just cool. And I learned so much about how people were trying to achieve that in the early 1900s in Arkansas, and the ways that they advanced public education and achieved food security for people in country areas. And something that I loved was they started to do community canning parties where all of these women would come together to learn about food preservation, and they would all do their food preserving together. And this would be a time not just for, productivity and preserving their food, but also a time for social interaction, also a time to teach each other things and like practical skills. And it was just, I don't know, it was cool to read about. If you're interested at all in Arkansas history, this is a great book. If you're interested at all in women's activism, this is a great book. If you, I don't know, this is a great book. I recommend it. It was great. 4.5 stars, if I didn't already say that. Another Arkansas history book that I rated 4.5 stars. I talked so much about this in my reading vlog that I read this in. So I would recommend you go watch that if you want to hear my actual thoughts. But just know that this is the only source material you will probably ever need if you want to learn about the Little Rock Nine and the desegregation of Central High School in Little Rock. This goes into so much detail with that whole historical event, and I truly cannot imagine learning anything more. Like, I feel like I know everything there is to know just after reading this one book. So, I highly recommend it. Next up, we've got an audiobook. I read Marcia, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline. And I kept calling this a memoir, but it is in fact a biography. So, apologies for that. But, ended up rating this 4.5 stars. It was really good, really insightful, really enlightening. Also very tragic. Like, it was so heart-wrenching to listen to all of the discrimination that Marcia and the trans community had to go through and experience. It was heavy at times, but it was also very bright and light at times, because that was who Marcia was. She was just so joyful and was known for all of the bright colors and the flowers, and known for her motherly approach to community. And it was just cool to listen to the story of her life, and I really liked the book a lot. I wish I could have read it physically, because I think that I would have maybe even enjoyed it a little bit more if I could have read it like in tandem and had them both. But it was very, very good. Big fan of that book. Then we have Codependent, which I rated 4.75 stars. This one, man, I learned so much about AI in this book. I learned about the pros and cons, the goods and the bads. There are a lot of bads, by the way. Don't know if you knew this, but AI is pretty scary. But the tone of this book was so focused on humanity and compassion and empathy for our fellow man. And I think that was the thing that got me through all of the terrifying things that technology can do, and the terrifying ways that AI can affect us, especially as women, especially marginalized communities, the way that they are affected by generative AI. And so to have this written in a tone that just cares so much about people makes it feel so much more grounded and so much more approachable. I'm so glad that this was the first book I ever read about AI, because I don't know if I could have started anywhere else. This was just a really, really solid intro, because it goes over so many different topics. It goes over the way that AI is used in medical practice, the way that AI is used to exploit and harass and abuse people's bodies, women's bodies especially. It goes into how AI is used in policing and surveillance. It just really covers a wide array of subjects. I just learned a lot. This was really, really good. I think the reason that I didn't rate it 5 stars, and I think I said this in my vlog, but I didn't rate this 5 stars because there were a few chapters that I didn't connect with quite as much, and so I felt like I was more prone to skimming those. So it didn't completely captivate me, but I did learn a lot. And then lastly, we have my only 5-star book of the month. Are you ready? Dinner for Vampires. Oh my god. I knew nothing about Bethany Joy Lenz, really. I didn't really watch One Tree Hill. I watched like a few episodes of it in college, but was never really invested in it. And so I was like brand new to the story of her life, and she narrates the audiobook herself and does such a phenomenal job. I was finding myself like wanting to listen to it just like all day long. And normally when I listen to audiobooks, I reserve it for my commutes to and from work. Not this one. This one, I was like, okay, I'll listen to it in the car. Perfect. Get home. Okay, I'll listen to it while I cook myself lunch. Okay, I'll listen to it before I go to bed. Like, I was so captivated by it. I was so enthralled and invested, and I just wanted to know that everyone was going to be okay. And wow. I mean, anything about religious cults is very impactful to me because I grew up in conservative Christianity, deep in religion. And while I don't think that I was not in like cult level religion, I do see some characteristics that are similar in my upbringing and hers. And so to connect to that personal experience was just like really, it just connected me to her so much and so deeply, and I felt for her so deeply. And it was just like honestly so impactful. I don't know any other word that could describe the way that book felt to listen to. It kind of rocked my world, truly. And I've read a lot of books on religion. I've read many books on cults, and this was one of the best. This was one of the best memoirs that I've read in a long time. Probably, honestly, it might be one of the best memoirs I've read this year, just as a whole. Read it, read it, read it, read it, read it, read it. I'm begging you. It was so good. So, that was everything I read in Nonfiction November. What a great reading month it was. Thank you so much for joining me on this nonfiction journey. I hope you read a lot of good nonfiction books. I hope you learned some things. I'm proud of you for educating yourself and for putting so much effort into your education. It rocks. Reading rocks, learning rocks, and don't you ever forget that. I'm really excited for December. I'm gonna attempt to do Vlogmas again. I did it last year with little to no preparation. So this year I'm trying to do a little bit of pre-filming, a little bit more preparation, just so I don't get behind, but be looking forward to some extra videos in December. There's a lot that I'm hoping to do, and we'll see if I can accomplish it all. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to subscribe to watch more bookish content from me, you can do so, and I would really appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts on my thoughts, you can leave those in the comments below. You can give this video a like if you liked it. All of those things are appreciated, but not necessary if you don't want to do those things. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I really don't have anything else to say. I feel like I've been yapping at you for a long time. So I'm gonna end this here, but I really appreciate you, and I am so glad you're here. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in December. Bye.